The year is 1985. Shoulder pads are king, neon lights paint the night, and a moral panic is brewing in Washington, D.C. Heavy metal is the devil's music. Dungeons & Dragons turns kids into Satanists, and rock lyrics are apparently corrupting the minds of America's youth. Enter Tipper Gore, wife of future Vice President Al Gore, clutching a copy of Prince's Purple Rain like it was a handbook for anarchy. A single lyric about female autonomy in the song Darling Nikki sparked outrage, leading Mrs. Gore to rally other concerned wives of powerful men. Thus, the Parents Music Resource Center, or the PMRC, was born. So, what was the PMRC's mission? You know, it was only to slap warning labels on the albums deemed too spicy for innocent ears. And their targets? Well, the usual suspects. Raucous rock bands like Motley Crue, suggestive pop stars like Prince, and Frank Zappa? Now, Zappa was an odd duck in this lineup. Sure, his music wasn't exactly your grandma's cup of tea. It was a bizarre genre-bending blend of rock, classical, and experimental chaos, often laced with dark humor and biting satire. But unlike the others, Zappa wasn't exactly singing about rebellion or teenage angst. His lyrics were a kaleidoscope of social commentary, philosophical musings, and yes, sometimes some downright weird stuff. So why did Zappa care so much about the PMRC's crusade? It wasn't just about protecting his own, admittedly strange music. Zappa, a fiercely independent artist, saw the PMRC's campaign as a slippery slope. Censorship based on subjective morality, he argued, was a threat to the very foundation of free expression. It wasn't about protecting children, it was about controlling what people could hear and say. This brings us to September the 19th, 1985. The PMRC had lobbied for a Senate hearing, and a bizarre cast of characters found themselves under the harsh glare of congressional lights. We had Tipper Gore, the concerned wife, leading the charge. We had Al Gore, future climate crusader, hilariously asking Twisted Sister's Dee Snider if his band's fan club, the Sick Mother Effers of Twisted Sister, was a Christian group, much to Snider's amusement. And then there was Frank Zappa, the musical maverick, ready to unleash a verbal smackdown that would leave Congress with a newfound respect for the power of rock and roll. Zappa wasn't there to play nice. He wasn't there to appease or placate. He was there to fight fire with fire. His weapon of choice was razor-sharp wit and a deep understanding of the First Amendment. He started by schooling the senators on its contents, just in case they'd forgotten it amidst all the pearl clutching. Then he went in for the kill. He dissected the PMRC's arguments, pointing out the absurdity of censorship based on subjective morality. He used his signature brand of biting humor to expose the hypocrisy of the entire situation. Imagine a room full of senators used to dry legalese being bombarded with Zappa's rapid-fire wit. It was a sight and sound to behold. But Zappa wasn't all about tearing things down. He offered a solution. Full disclosure. Why not simply print the lyrics on the album covers, he argued, letting parents decide for themselves what their kids could listen to. It was a simple, elegant solution that exposed the PMRC's true motives: control, not protection. The outcome? The PMRC labeling system did come into effect, but it was a hollow victory. The labels became a badge of honor for rebellious teens, not a deterrent. More importantly, Zappa's stand became a rallying cry for artists everywhere. His testimony was a potent mix of humor, intellect, and constant conviction that proved that rock and roll wasn't just about catchy tunes and outrageous outfits. It was about the right to express yourself freely and without fear. This wasn't just a battle over music. It was a clash between artistic freedom and censorship. We could say that Zappa, the unlikely hero, won. He may not have saved rock and roll entirely, but he sure as heck gave it a fighting chance, and in the process delivered a masterclass in how to outclass Congress with a microphone and a healthy dose of rock and roll swagger. But what many people still don't know is that Tipper Gore's crusade against offensive lyrics wasn't just about protecting innocent ears. It was a head-scratching moment in cultural history, and here's why. Remember Twist and Shout, the Beatles' early hit with John Lennon practically screaming, come on, baby now," and climaxing in a musical orgasm? Yeah, that song. The funniest part is that Tipper Gore, a boomer herself, used this song as an example of innocent 60s music compared to the depravity of the 80s. It was like the original OK Boomer moment, a parent from a generation with its own suggestive music policing the next. The PMRC, of course, insisted they weren't censoring anything. They simply wanted parents to be informed. They envisioned a system similar to movie ratings, with handy labels slapped on albums to warn of objectionable content. But music and movies are apples and oranges. The sheer volume of music being released, 25,000 songs a year compared to a measly 350 movies, made the idea impractical. To make things even more bizarre, the PMRC released a list of the filthy 15 songs they deemed particularly corrupting. This list included a strange mix: hard rockers like AC/DC and Motley Crue, metal bands most people had never even heard of, and even mainstream pop acts like Cyndi Lauper and Madonna, whose song Dress You Up would ironically be used in a Gap commercial years later. The record industry, meanwhile, found itself caught in a sticky situation. They desperately wanted a tax on blank cassette tapes, arguing it would cut down on piracy. Guess who held the key to that vote? Yeah, senators married to PMRC members. In a classic case of you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours, the RIAA was willing to throw free speech under the bus to get that tax passed. So when Congress called for hearings on these problematic lyrics, the only musicians who showed up to defend artistic freedom were the unlikely trio of Frank Zappa, Dee Snider, and John Denver. Oh yeah, a motley crew, you could say. And so came the day of the PMRC hearings. People say the PMRC hearings were the hottest ticket in Washington. Reporters crammed into the room, a scene one senator called the largest media event I've ever seen. Despite Tipper Gore's claims that the PMRC didn't ask for a Senate hearing, and the committee's insistence it wasn't about censorship, the agenda was clear. Senator Hollings opened the show with a flourish, declaring his desire to constitutionally do away with porn rock, if he could. Others framed record labeling as moral suasion, a kinder way of saying they wanted to control what people listened to. This moral outrage had a curious blind spot when it came to personal responsibility. Senator Hawkins, a staunch Republican who usually preached self-reliance, suddenly found it lacking when it came to rock music. Parents of drug-using or violent teens were somehow off the hook, but rock music? Well, that was a bridge too far. She even dismissed concerns about free speech under the First Amendment with a wave of her hand. Hawkins also perpetuated the myth of rock's sudden descent into darkness. According to her, the subtleties of Elvis's era had given way to a lyrical apocalypse. But this selective memory ignored the troublemaking music that inspired Elvis himself. Back in the 50s, Elvis wasn't exactly singing about rainbows and kittens. His sound was heavily influenced by Mississippi Delta bluesmen, guys who sang about deals with the devil, boozing, and even murder. Robert Johnson, a major influence on Elvis, famously sang about selling his soul to the devil. Leadbelly, another blues giant, wrote a chilling murder ballad and even served time for The Real Thing. Here's another funny thing. Despite music pushing the boundaries further than ever since 1985, teens aren't exactly living out these lyrics. Studies have shown that explicit content doesn't translate to a rise in teen pregnancy or other social ills. So much for the rock music is rotting our youth narrative. In this manner, the setting was established for the fitting arguments by Zappa. The Grand Inquisitors were ready, armed with convenient amnesia about musical history and a shaky grasp on the power of free speech. With the prosecution rested, it was time for the defense to take the stand. Gone were the salacious excerpts and melodramatic pronouncements, of course. But Frank Zappa saw right through the charade. He cut straight to the chase, questioning whether the committee truly wanted to avoid legislation, a jab directly at Senator Hollings' earlier outburst. Before Zappa could get deeper, though, Senator Danforth shut him down, reminding him to stick to his testimony and avoid questioning the senators. But you can't silence a man on a mission, especially one armed with wit and the Constitution. Despite Senator Exxon's attempt to find a voluntary middle ground, a notion Zappa scoffed at, the musician launched into a verbal takedown that would become legendary. Zappa unleashed a scathing critique, calling the PMRC proposal an ill-conceived piece of nonsense. He exposed the absurdity of the plan. It wouldn't protect children, it would infringe on the rights of everyone else, and it would create a legal nightmare for years to come. With a killer metaphor, Zappa compared the PMRC's solution to treating dandruff by decapitation. In other words, their approach was overkill, completely destroying artistic freedom to address a minor issue. This wasn't just clever wordplay as it seemed, it perfectly captured the PMRC's heavy-handed tactics. Zappa's testimony was a masterclass in speaking truth to power. He didn't shy away from calling out the committee's hypocrisy and the PMRC's flawed logic. He had laid down the gauntlet, presenting a clear and concise defense of free speech that would be hard to ignore. The senators weren't exactly thrilled with Zappa's approach. One senator called him boorish and questioned his understanding of the First Amendment. But before they could get ahead into that rabbit hole, John Denver, the wholesome singer-songwriter, took the stand. On paper, Denver seemed like an unlikely ally for Zappa. Here was the guy known for clean-cut anthems like Take Me Home, Country Roads. But Denver surprised everyone. Despite his religious beliefs, he firmly opposed government censorship. He spoke from personal experience, recalling how his own song, Rocky Mountain High, was banned for supposedly referencing drugs when it was actually about the beauty of nature. Denver said that the PMRC's crusade was a threat to democracy, likening it to the censorship practiced by totalitarian regimes. He even made a dramatic exit, leaving the hearing of a pre-scheduled meeting with NASA. Yes, you heard that right. Dee Snider, the lead singer of Twisted Sister, was the last musician to testify. Unlike Zappa and Denver, Snider is still very much alive and rocking in 2024. He suspected the PMRC, or perhaps more accurately, the senators' wives behind the PMRC, were trying to make a mockery of him, but Snider came prepared. While Zappa and Denver looked like clean-cut businessmen, Snider arrived in full rock star regalia, jeans, tank top, and enough hairspray to shame a flock of pigeons. But his appearance wasn't the only shocker. Snider, a self-proclaimed Christian and family man, countered the PMRC's accusations with facts and logic, dismantling their misinterpretations of his music. That was a sight to behold. Three very different artists, united in their defense of free speech, had delivered their testimonies. Now it was up to Congress to decide, would they side with artistic freedom or cave to the pressure of a well-connected wives' club? Congress, caught in a political tug-of-war, landed somewhere in the messy middle. Faced with this public spectacle of the hearings and the passionate defenses of Zappa, Denver, and Snider, they didn't outright endorse censorship. However, they also yielded some ground to the PMRC. The result? The now ubiquitous Parental Advisory Explicit Lyrics sticker. It wasn't the government control the PMRC craved, but it was a concession. A compromise that, depending on your perspective, either placed a warning label on potentially harmful content or slapped a target on artistic expression. So how did Congress decide? They didn't exactly pick a side. They hedged their bets, hoping to appease both the concerned parents and the free speech advocates. In the end, they created a solution that left everyone a little unsatisfied. It's true that battles over art and expression rarely have clear-cut victories. But all in all, the PMRC hearings remind us of nothing but the dangers of moral panic and the ever-present threat to free expression. These hearings, filled with overblown concerns and misguided attempts at control, do nothing but make the way for future battles over art, music, and free speech. In the end, it was a group of unlikely heroes, a rocker, a folkie, and a weirdo composer who stood up for artistic freedom. Their battle, especially Zappa's, may not have been entirely won, but their defense reminds us of the importance of fighting for the uncensored expression of ideas, even the strange and hard ones.